Welcome to FYI. I'm Barry ZeVAN, and my guest today is, I'm happy to say, a longtime friend and just a giant in Indian country and this whole country. And his name is Cris Stainbrook, and he's president of the Indian Land Tenure Foundation in Little Canada, Minnesota. And Cris, it's wonderful to see you here.
Well, Barry, it's an honor to be here. Well, thank you for asking me.
You're welcome. Thank you. My honor. Cris and I actually met because a mutual friend had said to me, I think that the Indian Land Tenure Foundation should let people know a lot about what they do. So back in 2006, or 2005 actually, we produced this. Cris was the co-producer of American Indian Homelands, Matters of Truth, Honor, and Dignity Immemorial. And my friend Sam Donaldson, at Chris's suggestion, was the host and narrator of the documentary, and it's available on Amazon. And we hope that people will take a look at it, because I certainly learned a lot. It's sad, in my opinion, that most people in this country are not aware of everything that has happened to the American Indians, and that, I assume, that's one of the reasons the foundation was created. Was that, Cris?
Well, it is. We were created, in essence, because in this country, people really don't understand what has happened to Indian land, and land that was promised to Indian people for exclusive use and occupation by treaties and executive orders. And when we started the foundation, we recognized that at the outset, we really needed to do large wholesale education of the populace, both Indian and non-Indian, but particularly non-Indian folks who just had no understanding of Indian country whatsoever. And so we spent about, in the first 10 years, 15 years even, about 80% of our resources just doing education. Which, when you, Barry, you gave this very brief introduction to the video, I remember precisely the day you came in and said, I would like to do something with you. and what could it be? And we had no clue who you were. And it was funny because both Howard Valandra and I were sitting there, and you were explaining that you would like to work with us because you felt strongly about the issue. And then you got your 3-ring binder out and started showing pictures of you with various people and said you do some film. And we had just been talking about doing a film because we needed a way to educate people more broadly. And we knew about Indian land, and you knew about filmmaking. And so you led us through the process of the whole documentary, and we appreciate that a great deal, more than I could ever convey to you.
Well, thank you.
And when it won the Telly Award, they called and told us we won the Telly Award, and we had no idea what it was. We had to, I remember calling you and say, what's a Telly Award? and you explained it to us. So thank you very much. That particular documentary has been shown any number of times now on the documentary channel. It was the feature documentary for some period of time, and we hear about it every time we go out to Indian country to do work. Someone will have just seen the documentary and mention it to us. So,
oh, that's wonderful. I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, you have made any number of the people who are on the documentary movie stars in their own right.
Well, I hope it doesn't go to their heads.
No, but I think it was a lesson for us in how to reach the masses fairly quickly. There are pieces of the documentary that people remember, and remember well. When Dwight Archambault from Standing Rock unfurls the title record that's 78 feet long and says, you know, there are thousands and thousands of owners of 160 acres. You know, the those types of things stay with people more than us just going out and doing a talk to folks. It's that combination of the information with the visual image that really lasts with people.
Well, I'm
So
thrilled.
we thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the privilege to do it. There are so many aspects of that that go through. Brad and I, Brad Johnson, the photographer, also an American Indian, who was the director of photography. I think we shot for 6 or 7 months in 14 states and the District of Columbia, and just it's one of the thrills of my life. You are Lakota, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then born in Iowa?
Born in Iowa. My grandfather took one of the relocation programs, one of the early relocation programs, and moved from Pine Ridge to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and grew up. He changed his whole persona living in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, became a baker. And then we grew up in a small town of Brandon, Iowa. My father's ancestors were the first non-Indian settlers in Brandon and Buchanan County in Iowa. And so I kind of have it on both sides of the family.
Sure. And too, I mean, your history is very varied and fascinating to me. You were a marine biologist, is that correct?
Fisheries biologist, yeah. I got my master's in fisheries at Oregon State University, and then went to work for the Warm Springs tribes in Central Oregon, working on primarily salmon issues, but other on-reservation fisheries as well. But was part of the negotiating team for USV Oregon, the salmon allocations on the Columbia River. And I also did a lot of the other political biology for the tribes, which led me to happen to be in Central Oregon at a minimum stream flow hearing one night, and we were down there with the tribal biologist and one of the tribal council folks from Umatilla, and I was complaining about how hard it was to do fisheries biology on the Columbia River. And the gentleman from Umatilla says to me, well, if you think that's hard, you ought to try Indian Land. And you know, I was young, I was full of hubris, and and all right, I'll do Indian Land for a little bit, and then I can go back to fisheries biology once I solve Indian Land, right? So 30 years later, almost 40 years later now, here I sit and still doing Indian Land.
Wow. Now you were up in the Aleutians too, is that correct?
Yeah, I worked up at Kodiak Island for about 3.5 years.
Wow.
Off and on, I would go up, and I was living in the Portland, Oregon area at the time, but I would go up and work on Kodiak and out in the villages. Tried to get my wife to move to one of the villages, and it wasn't in the cards. She couldn't see much to do in a village of 300 for her.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But,
It's kind of an isolated life.
yeah.
Yeah. Did any of that history in your work life translate any of it into the Indian land work that you do?
Oh yeah, certainly the work up at Kodiak did. I mean, they were working under the Alaska Natives Claims Act, and of course that's all about land. And out at Kodiak, you had this interaction between the regional corporation and the local corporations that were set up under ANCSA, and the division of land and resources became very clear very quickly, and the interactions were such that it's not terribly unlike what has happened in the lower U.S. In this with the states and the counties and the tribes and kind of the jurisdictional issues, as well as even within the tribe having sometimes struggles between the local communities on the reservation and the tribe itself. So there's there are some real overlaps there. And you know, my years as a fisheries biologist, of course, were all about who decides who gets what. And that, of course, translates pretty directly to much of the land issues as well.
Yeah. Do you feel you're making progress?
We're making progress. Some days we make a lot of progress, and some days we take a few steps back, but we're making progress. We've helped the tribes get back about between 50 and 60,000 acres of land, generally pretty important land. We helped a tribe in Oregon recover one of their village sites, which they had not been on for many, many years. In fact, almost 100 years at that point. We helped 6 tribes from the Lakota Nation, the Lakota Dakota Nation, recover Peshla, which is one of the 5 holy sites for the Lakota people, where the star knowledge came from. And that's in the center of the Black Hills. And so those tribes went together and recovered the site so that their tribal members can go up and practice their ceremonies there. And that had not been the case under the former owner. And so, yeah, we're making progress.
Well, that's good. Hopefully as much as you want to make. I remember one of the interviewees in the documentary was Eloise Cobell, and I remember Sam Donaldson had said to me that he was so impressed when he interviewed her on Nightline years before that she was the most powerful person he had ever interviewed. And God bless her, she is now passed, but her legacy is phenomenal. I think is what she did out in Montana still as vibrant as it was when she was alive?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that, you know, Eloise was a good friend of mine, and I always thought one of the things that got sold short in the court case, Cabell versus Salazar at the time, was the actual changes within the structure, within the Bureau of Indian Affairs and within the Department of Interior. Those changes still are there today, and they would never have happened without that lawsuit. And I think it was what we received in Indian country in terms of monetary value for the lawsuit was dwarfed by going forward the changes that will continue on in how the funds are accounted for by the Office of Special Trustee and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, in terms of lease payments coming to Indian people, in terms of royalties from oil and gas, all those pieces. That will go well into the future. And I don't think that was recognized enough in the lawsuit. People got focused on what's the monetary value that's going to be put on, you know, the misaccounting of funds over time. But Eloise, in fact, even in the filing of the lawsuit, had been very clear, this is about changing the system. And she clearly changed the system.
Well, she was a wonderful person to meet and interview. You kindly guided me to the people we interviewed because they were the strongest to address the problems and the issue. And thank you for that.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people are not aware, you have testified before Congress too. Is that kind of a scary proposition, or, I mean, knowing the subject as well as you do, and being as strong a person as you are, I would assume it wouldn't be too intimidating, but I wonder, is it pretty intimidating?
Well, I don't know that I would say it's intimidating. The last time I did it, one of the things that was interesting is they had pretty much cut down the amount of time you were going to get without necessarily letting you know very much in advance. So and then it turns out that I had submitted written testimony, and the chair of the Natural Resources Committee read my testimony as his opening statement, which left me little or nothing to say.
Shame on him. Shame on him.
So I was kind of scrambling around a bit at that. But you know, the reality is the folks who are on the Hill in the House and in the Senate are informed by their staffs. And so when you see them sitting there with their staff members, you can anticipate some fairly clear, concise questions. When they're not sitting there with their staff members, you can begin to think some of the questions might be coming from left field. And I know that's a little disparaging of our elected officials, but the reality is, how much time do they have to spend in great detail on any given topic? And you know quickly which ones have been paying attention to the topic you're working on.
Sure. With the history of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, do you think now, and this is coming from a layman who just observing newscasts and so forth, and anything that's come out in the news about the BIA, do you think it's improved as far as their real concern about what's happening? I'm trying to think of the head of the BIA a long time ago, and he seemed to just be a figurehead and not really care. Do you feel there's more caring?
No, I think I think that's one of the pieces that came out of the lawsuit that Eloise pursued, was there's enough attention that Congress now understands, if nothing else, Congress now understands that there's a liability there. If they don't, if the Bureau of Indian Affairs does not fulfill the trust relationship with the tribes and Indian people, that there's a liability to be had. And so I think we've seen the professionalism and the transactions that go on increase dramatically with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I think some of the appointees within the department and within the Bureau of Indian Affairs specifically, some of the more political appointees that are done have been much higher caliber individuals than we had 30, 40 years ago, where it was really a political type of situation. I think we've had some very good ones over the past few years, and I think that bodes well for the BIA.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Good.
I think also having the Office of Special Trustee created it was created just before the court case was filed, but then really took its shape and function during the lawsuit in the late 90s. And that has, I think, having the Office of Special Trustee side by side with the Bureau of Indian Affairs really helped move things quickly and out there.
Good. I remember John McCain and Tom Daschle were two of the interviewees in the documentary, and Senator McCain brought out something which I did not know, and apparently, of course, I'm not a rocket scientist, but the fact that when the Pilgrims came, they brought diseases, and can you elaborate a little more on what they brought? I forgot exactly what the...
Well, I think there's, I mean, it's pretty well documented in history of there was this exposure to smallpox and influenza and a whole host of tuberculosis and other diseases that people hadn't been subjected to, and so had no immunity to it, and really decimated the tribes, particularly in the east, but also all the way out to the West Coast. Certainly at Walla Walla and the Whitman Mansion, the massacre that took place there was in fact born out of a disease that had come in and wiped out the local Indian people.
Oh my gosh.
So-
I remember he said something about blankets that were infested with something.
Well, that's the story, and I don't know. I have no independent confirmation of it, but the story goes through Indian country that, in fact, the smallpox was infested blankets were distributed to the Indian people, and it could easily have happened. But so was influenza and any number of other things that came from non-Indian people to Indian people.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and I remember Senator Daschle saying what a travesty it was, and that it's been for Indian people from the beginning. So it made me feel happy that they were aware, that they really cared. They seemed to really care about it. I don't know if happy is the word, but it made me feel that there was a genuineness of their thinking, and I hope that it permeated enough of the Congress people to try to help make things better. Do you feel that they were influential enough to do that?
I think they were. I mean, Tom Daschle, I was a little surprised when he was out of Congress.
Yeah.
He was a good person for understanding Indian country. When I first met John McCain, it was back, in the late 80s during the Wilderness Bill in Oregon. Wow. And I tell people this, that in fact, I would have voted for John McCain as I knew him back then. And he was very much about hearing out where the tribes were at and where Indian people were at on issues. I didn't really recognize him when he ran for office, for the presidency. The language had all changed, the dynamics had all changed, but you know, that's, I guess, politics. I think one of the things that has occurred over the last few years is there's more attention paid to some of the issues around not just land, not just Indian land, but around Indian issues generally. I think people are the general public is beginning to recognize that in fact what happens to how Indian people get treated generally tends to come to them as well over time. We saw that in, Indian land can be taken for any reason, basically, by the federal government, and you don't even get due process on it. And then when we saw the case out east where the land was taken for a developer to essentially eminent domain from one private party to another, all of a sudden that caused people in this country to say, that's not right. This isn't correct. So, I think there's more recognition of that in fact, I hate to use the canary in the coal mine. I think Sam Donaldson actually said it on the DVD that it's more what can happen to one in this democracy can happen to any. And I think that's true, and I think people look to Indian country, and when that happens, sometimes we chuckle in Indian country and go, well, welcome to Indian country. This is what we've been experiencing for a long time.
Yeah, for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Thousands.
Yeah.
In Europe, I know that one of the countries especially, they don't make fun of, but they honor American Indians, and that's in Germany. And what do they have, like 2,000 people show up for powwows and things of that nature?
I would like to travel to Germany to meet with the folks. From what I understand, there are any number of tribes, if you will, over there. They study the tribes of North America and emulate what goes on, or even emulate what did go on in the culture. There are language clubs where there are German people who speak Lakota fluently. and they are very much into that emulation. They come over and travel the reservations here in this country on a regular basis during the summers, and
Wow.
it's a real tourist thing for them.
That's wonderful. Well, I hope that the rest of the world realizes. I think, have you heard, or either through the grapevine or through the years, that aside from Germany, that most of the other countries in the world realize what happened to American Indians here?
I think some do. We had some visitors up from South America, Argentina and Colombia and some other countries down there. And they came out to the office and we sat down and had a day of discussion. And what was interesting at the end, especially the people from Argentina, they were talking amongst themselves, since I didn't understand Spanish and the language, and finally the interpreter says, they said, "How could you have it so bad? We thought we were bad off, but this is really terrible." And I think it was an eye-opener to them. Of course, what they were primarily talking about was the most insidious thing that went on was the General Allotment Act and the division of commonly and communally held tribal land and divided out to tribal members. And then we lost almost 2/3 of the land through taking or sales or other pieces, which resulted in the checkerboarding of a lot of reservations, but at the same time made a lot of our land unusable because of the fractionated title. The division, the land stays intact, but the title divides among thousands and thousands of Indian people.
Right. On Dwight Archambault, you mentioned before, when he showed that incredible list, I think he said that some tribal members own 1 inch of land or something like
Yes,
that.
yes.
It's horrendous.
Yeah.
It's
Well, the
outrageous.
smallest interest I have ever seen, personally seen, on one of the statements was 1/32 million. So if you take 1/32 million of 160 acres, you're talking about something maybe about this size.
Terrible.
So,
Cris, I can't thank you enough.
well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. My honor, my pleasure. And aside from my shameless plug for my book here, Barry ZeVAN, My Life Among the Giants, and this gentleman is definitely one of those. It's available on Amazon, and again, American Indian Homelands, hosted and narrated by Sam Donaldson, is available also on Amazon, and the proceeds help the Indian Land Tenure Foundation. So I hope that you'll definitely go on to get American Indian Homelands, and my book would be secondary, but I hope so too. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.